only a politician could come up with something quite that absurd. But on the other hand, when you get to the UN and other things, it's politicians that run it. And they've enabled this hysteria. They're frightening children. Lives are going to be finished in short order. Even the UN's IPCC, in its one working group that deals with science, that's working group 1, it's a 1,000-page report. They don't speak about an existential threat. So you have other reports from the UN that are not scientific that say, oh yes, it's coming to the end of the world. And politicians say, well, this is what we have to go by. I don't know what you do. It's an evil movement, and it's causing immense damage. And it is trying to condemn people in Africa and the developing world to perpetual poverty. Mm. And you have to ask, why would this be a goal? Mm. I don't know.
One of the cornerstones of this, let's call it an agenda, is the constant bombardment to the public of reports on the rise of extreme weather events. Are these reports a patent false or attribution to climate change false?
First of all, yeah, you're pointing to something very important. Even if it were occurring, how do you relate it to this one number? But it's not even true. And again, going back to the IPCC, the UN's report, they say there is virtually no evidence of a relationship between extreme events and climate change. Now, they say that, but that doesn't fit the politics, so they say something else. It's a little, I don't know if you know the American comic of years ago, Groucho Marx.
Sounds slightly maybe I've been before my time.
Had a wonderful statement. I have my principles. If you don't like them, I have others.
That's actually a good description. On the politicization of this climate change, what do you think the end goal could possibly be for the manipulation of data given by the IPCC and the dismissal of data that contradicts it?
Well, I mean, the energy sector is vital. Mm-hmm. It is the harnessing of fossil fuels that has led to the massive development of the Western world. The progress since the invention of the steam engine has been the major feature in world history. On the other hand, because it's such a large sector, there are opportunities to make fortunes even if your only activity is destroying the system. So, for example, I mean, in the U.S., our current budget is, showing trillions of dollars for climate change. Well, whether you think it makes sense or not doesn't matter. Somebody's going to get those trillions of dollars, and they have a real interest.
I would assume that the predominant funding would go to renewables. Pretty much everything that's not nuclear or fossil fuels.
What about the tools that extract energy from this? They're not renewable. They involve slave labor. Mm-hmm. That sounds pretty good, doesn't it? No, you have material usage, you have destruction of landscapes. It's almost as though the environmental movement has decided to commit suicide and go in for things that destroy the environment, which is what you're doing with solar panels and windmills and so on. You're killing birds, you're destroying the environment. These have lifetimes of 10, 20 years. You don't know how to dispose of them. Now, this has nothing to do with the environment. It's a power play.
I had an interview with Professor William Happer, and he said that the climate change activism movement is a joke and comparable to a coalition or organized crime unit of religious fanaticism. And you've expressed the same sentiment.
Sure.
To what extent do you think that this is a result of people having pure intentions but not being properly informed, or just trying to spin the situation far away from what the actual reality is?
It's a little hard to assess motivations. You're certainly taking the public, making them feel that if they get rid of carbon dioxide, they're doing something virtuous.
Uh,
Of course, as I've occasionally pointed out, let's say somebody came up with a good device, they could get rid of about 60–70% of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. What would be the result? The result would be we'd all be dead. That's a very peculiar pollutant, one that we can't live without.
No.
I think it's based a lot on ignorance.
Uh,
You have economists talking about tipping points, and the geologists know that through most of the Earth's history, we've had far greater amounts of CO2. There's never any evidence of a tipping point. This is a very implausible thing. But it sounds scary. It's pretty clear, looking back on the history of the issue, when it got started in the early 80s, that it was already a governmental aim. You had these meetings at Villach in Austria and Bellagio, and there would be people interested in climate attending these, usually about 100. And those from the government were all in favor of this, and the others were scratching their head and asking, what's this about? So somewhere along the way, somebody must have decided this is the way to go. They started pushing for it. Global cooling wasn't panning out. I think from the beginning of Earth Day, it was obvious you wanted to control the energy sector. At first, it was sort of amateurish, acid rain, global cooling. And then, someone realized, no matter how clean you made energy, it would still produce CO2. So let's go after that. You'll never